I'm working on my syllabus for my filmmaking students this semester, and I thought I would show you guys how I'm teaching the 3-act structure for a screenplay this semester. This is how I teach the 3-act structure in a screenplay. Professor Spade Robinson, this is how I teach it. I teach film at 2 different universities, and one of the courses I'm teaching is called The Joy of Storytelling, and I will be teaching them how to structure a screenplay. So I'm gonna take you through it. A lot of people teach it a lot of different ways. This is pretty rudimentary, so a lot of people teach it this exact way, and I just add a little bit of my own razzle dazzle in terms of how I teach and outline. But I hope this helps. So this outline, this page that's behind me, is from a book that I wrote called Script from Scratch. It's on Amazon, and it takes you through the entire development process for a feature screenplay. So if you're interested in going through the development process for your feature screenplay, then you might want to check this out. What it does is it goes through the development process in 4 weeks. It's a workbook, so you write on the workbook. I'll show you a few pages from it at the end. And what you have is you create 2 outlines and 2 beat sheets, but while you're doing that, it takes you through the entire development process. So you do character development, world building, everything that you need to do to answer all the creative decisions in your screenplay so you never get writer's block. That's what the workbook does. Again, it's called Script from Scratch. It's available on Amazon, and if you're unable to find it, or if you'd like the digital version is on my website, atlantafilmproject.com. If you have any questions, just jump in my DMs or comment, and I will answer questions about the workbook. Okay, on to the outline. So I start off with Act 1. In Act 1, there is the status quo and the inciting incident. The status quo is the world of your character before the story starts. I like to call it comfortable dysfunction. So what comfortable dysfunction is your character living in? Meaning things are not operating at the way that they should for your character, but your character hasn't done anything about it, and nothing has happened in their world dramatic enough to take them out of that dysfunction. So if your character is in a bad marriage, a bad job, they're bored, they're dissatisfied, whatever's happening in their world, when we first meet them, they're in the middle of that status quo. They haven't been jerked out of it. They will be jerked out of it by the inciting incident, which is next. So first you show your character sort of going through their life. They're not happy about it, or if they are happy about it, that is their status quo. And their comfortable dysfunction is going through a life with no major representation of the truth, or no representation of that things could go wrong, right? They're in their own ignorant bliss, which is its own version of comfortable dysfunction. And then, so you have to show this first. This is where we meet them. This is your character's introduction scene, which I talk ad nauseum about a character introduction scene, but the character introduction scene happens during the status quo. And then after that, you have your inciting incident. And that is the point that jerks your character out of their status quo. So something happens. Their partner wants to file for divorce. They get fired from their job. Their parent dies. They have to move back to their hometown. They get a new assignment to write an article and have to go back to high school. Whatever it is, they get jerked out of their status quo by the event that is their inciting incident. Okay, I want to take a tiny step back and talk about the fact that I talk about these things as events. These are not scenes, these are events. These are just things that happen. This is what I call a short outline before you move on to a longer outline. And I can go into a medium outline and a long outline if you're interested, but this is the bones of your screenplay, your skeleton. It does not have flesh on it. It does not have skin on it. This is just the bones of your screenplay. And once you have this solid foundation, then you start to build on top of it. So in Act 1, we experience a status quo and then an inciting incident, something that happens that jerks your character out of their status quo. And then in Act 2, we have the point of no return. The point of no return is your character's reaction to the inciting incident. So let's say status quo is your character is in a job that they hate, they don't love it. But then they get jerked out of that status quo by getting fired from their job. That's their inciting incident. What's the decision that they make in reaction to getting fired? Do they have to move back in with their parents? then the decision they make, the moment they make a decision, I'm actually doing this, they get in the car and drive back to their hometown. That is the point of no return in the beginning of Act 2. After that, we have our climax. The climax, a lot of people think of the climax as the most dramatic thing that happens in the screenplay. I do not. I think of the climax as the moment where your character gets everything that they want, but they have not changed. So let's say they move back to their hometown and things seem comfortable. Their parents are paying their bills. Everything is happening in their favor, but this character has not changed. And I have another video about the story statement. The story statement will tell you what needs to change for that character. So the character seems to be living high off the hog, but haven't changed. If this was a boy meets girl story, then this would be the first time that the boy and girl go on a date, or the first time the girl says yes to going on a date, the first time they make love, whatever it is that the character thinks they're getting what they want, but they haven't changed yet. After that, I have the trigger. The trigger isn't something that I usually see in outlines for screenplays, but I put it in there because the trigger is that sort of inkling towards, oh crap, maybe this isn't perfect. In the climax, your character hasn't changed yet. When we get to the trigger, it's sort of like that chink in the armor. It's just this tiny, tiny thing that the writer drops in there to let you know that's the beginning of the end. So if this is a boy meets girl story, then it may be that the girl finds out that the boy is like harboring tiny bottles of alcohol. And you're like, why does he have these little tiny bottles of alcohol anywhere? And then we forget about it and go on about the story. So it's just like a little bit of like, huh, that's interesting. And it's evidence that things are not gonna go perfectly, but we don't really pay attention to it because it's so small. That's the trigger. After the trigger is the lowest point. That is when your character loses it all. They lose what they want, they lose what they think that they need, they lose everything. That's the lowest point. You've heard of that like a million times in screenwriting. And then after that, that's the end of the Act 2. So that's what we call the bottom of the second act, when your character loses it all. And then after that, we begin Act 3, close to the end of the movie, with lasting change. That is, after your character has lost it all, your character makes a decision that permanently changes. So let's say if it's the boy meets girl, by the climax, he's gotten the date and things seem to be going well. By the trigger, there's little bottles of alcohol everywhere. What does that mean? And things seem to be fine until they start to fall apart, which brings us to the lowest point. That means boy lost the job, boy lost the girl, boy lost the trust and the faith of his family. Boy lost everything. So then by Act 3, he does lasting change. He goes to rehab. He gets out of his relationship with his best friend because his best friend is also an alcoholic. Whatever needs to be done, that is lasting change. That's the beginning of the third act. That's that decision that they make to make lasting change. And by the end, you have a conclusion, meaning what's the conclusion? Do they change or do they not? I'm agnostic about it. I don't think it has to be a happy ending. You as the writer decide what the ending is, but this is the conclusion. So you answer the question, did they change or did they not, by way of what we see in the conclusion. Sometimes there's a post-conclusion conclusion, which is what is their life now, or sometimes there's an extra button on the end. I don't think that's for every story, but some stories it is for. Okay, so how does all of this work? How does this outline work? Basically, these are the major big chunks of events that happen in a screenplay. And then after you finish making these decisions, and actually it takes me the longest time to decide on these because it's the foundation of your screenplay. These are the major events that happen. So once you're done with this outline, you're gonna go back and write the major events that need to happen between the status quo and the inciting incident. And then what are the major events that need to happen between the inciting incident and the point of no return? So after you're done with this, you fill in the in-between spaces with the chunks of events that need to happen in between these major events that are the foundation. And once you're done making those events happen in between, then these become scenes. Once those events become scenes, you have every scene in your screenplay. If this isn't clear, let me know, drop me a comment and I can make another video about it. But this outline will save your life. Once you're done with this version of it, then the medium version, then the long version, you've written every single scene in your screenplay and you're done. This is what the cover of the workbook looks like if you're interested in the workbook. I see outlines as the most important thing you'll ever do in screenwriting, so I hope this helps.